welcome to Everyone's a Critic. My name is Amayo, and I'm here with Monica, Nick, and Amos, and we're going to talk about the Oscars. So where do you guys want to start with this? Best Actor?
Sure.
What do you guys
Sure.
think?
Sure. Well, for Best Actor, I think everyone's pretty much assuming that Leo is going to be winning this one.
Mm-hmm.
And this year is looking like it could be his year, especially with him recently winning the SAG Award. They pretty much predict fairly well who's going to be the front runner at the Oscars.
You know, I checked the Vegas odds right now. If you were to bet on Leo winning the Oscar, the odds are something like $1.05 to $1.
Wow.
As opposed to like the next closest, which is Michael Fassbender at like 12 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think he's got a considerable lead on that.
Interesting.
Actually, now that you mentioned Michael Fassbender, so the thing is, most people would probably say that Leonardo DiCaprio is probably the gigantic front runner, and if you were asked to ask me who I think would win, that's probably what I would say. But as to who I want to win, I'm going to kind of go against the trend here, and I think that Michael Fassbender and Steve Jobs was actually the one who had the better performance this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Leo put himself through a lot of great challenges and went through a bunch of changes to get his role, and I applaud the man for doing that. But if you watch Steve Jobs, Michael Fassbender became Steve Jobs. Like, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, when he saw the movie afterwards, he said it was like looking at Steve Jobs entering the room. So I think we really need to give him some credit here, even though the entire story is about how Leo might finally get his.
And I mean, we can't forget about Eddie Redmayne, who in The Danish Girl, granted, he's probably not going to be winning the Oscar this year, but for his role as a transgender person, he received quite a bit of praise when the movie did come out, and a
He's
lot
also
of people.
the defending champ.
Yes, and a lot of people
True.
still are holding some hope for him as well. And then, you know, Matt Damon with The Martian.
Oh yeah, Matt Damon's comedy chops definitely made the Martian the comedy of the year.
I actually found Matt Damon to be the most questionable of these nominees. Just because, like, I felt he was almost playing himself. I didn't think there was a whole lot of range in his role. I kind of felt like if you see him in interviews, he kind of does that same thing. He's that cocky sense of humor. And I felt like he was just kind of feeding off that for most of The Martian. And, I mean, he did a great job. He was one of the only people on screen for 90% of the movie. And I wasn't at all bored by him. But I thought it was a bit of a stretch.
So we want to talk about the actress nominations now?
Sure.
Yes, actresses. What do you guys think of Cate Blanchett and Carol?
I think in this year's Oscars, she's probably going to come in middle of the pack, if anything. I mean, she does have quite a bit of experience on some of the newer people, like Brie Larson and Saoirse Ronan, but was it the best? Probably not for the Oscar this year.
Yeah, I will say she does have the sort of Oscar politics going for her as far as like the subject matter of Carol, you know, being about a lesbian couple and that fight for marriage equality is definitely a topical issue that I think the Oscars would like to get behind, and we saw that with quite a number of nominations for that movie. But right now, I think this award is Brie Larson's to lose. You know, especially after the SAG last night. I just think she's put a decent amount of headway in front of the other candidates.
Yep.
I definitely think that it should go to Brie Larson. I mean, when you have a movie like Rome, it pretty much how well the movie does pretty much depends entirely upon how well Brie Larson conveys her performance, since her character is such an important one within the film. And in doing so, she definitely knocked it out of the park and made Rome an extremely captivating and poignant movie. So I think Brie Larson is the odds-on favorite at this point, and it's well deserved too, definitely.
And I'd say for runner-up, Saoirse Ronan's for Brooklyn is looking like a pretty good runner-up for there. I mean, Brie Larson's still probably going to walk away with it, but Saoirse, this is kind of like her big breakout role for Oscar-worthy performances, and she's gotten a lot of fan favorite noms for this, and a lot of good support for what she's done. And then Jennifer Lawrence from Joy, it's looking like this year she's more of a crowd favorite, and I think some people are now trying to like get her to do other movies, not specifically with the same people like Bradley Cooper and David O. Russell. It's kind of becoming too repetitive in what she's doing, and I mean, she's so young and playing such an older character. It's kind of hard to watch it somewhat.
That's
in this.
definitely true. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence is a good actress, and she can bring incredible performances in the right roles. But as you said, even though she wasn't terrible in this movie, but as you did say, she did feel a lot miscast, since Joy, the main character in Joy, was supposed to be a more mature maternal type of character, and when Jennifer Lawrence is in her mid-20s, it just doesn't convey the same amount of gravitas that another actress might have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, so Best Director. What are you guys thinking?
So Best Director, right now it definitely looks like the award will go to Alejandro Inarritu for the Revenant, and I definitely do agree that I definitely do see the merits of such a decision, because the Revenant, from a purely technical perspective, from a casting perspective, it was extremely well done, and you could definitely tell that this is once again a movie made by an artist at the peak of his craft, especially in coming off of his previous film, which was Birdman, that was also extremely well done from almost every perspective. But for my own personal leanings toward this subject, I think that George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road definitely should get some sort of recognition.
Yeah.
If nothing less than the fact that he's literally spent the greater part of the last 2 decades trying to get this project into reality.
And also with George Miller, Ridley Scott didn't get a nomination, and what Miller did with the effects in his movie, really would be a surprise if he won, but then again, he does deserve some credit for what he did. And Tom McCarthy for Spotlight, I think he'd probably get like a runner-up or maybe middle of the pack, just because it seems like with the Spotlight and everyone loving it, this category, he's kind of like fallen to the bottom with the Spotlight praise. All the other main categories that Spotlight are in are kind of overshadowing him in this particular category.
I'd like to see some love for the director of Room, Abramson. I mean, we're looking at Revenant, $140 million budget, Mad Max, $100+ million budget, and Room is sitting there, $6 million budget. It's a tiny project, and he managed to crank out something that is like up there with the big boys. It's nominated for a ton of awards, and with like a tenth, if less than that, of what everyone else is working with money-wise. I thought that was really impressive, and just kind of the way he invoked emotion and through like cinematography and just through really focusing on the actors and getting like a great performance out of such a young star in Jacob Tremblay is really impressive. It's not something a lot of directors can do. We've seen a lot of kids get up there and just they're just kind of in front of the screen reading the words.
Yeah. I definitely agree with what you're saying about how the director of Rome was one of the major factors for transforming it into such a great movie, because I'll be honest, the subject matter isn't exactly what you consider traditional Oscars material, especially when you look at some of the other heavyweights, such as The Big Short, which is about the 2008 financial crisis, The Revenant, which is a period piece, a character-focused period piece, Spotlight, which is talking about the Catholic priest molestation scandal. And I'll be completely honest, when I first heard of The Room and I saw the plot description, I thought it was just another poorly done, crappy Lifetime movie kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
So, but once I actually saw it, that's when I realized that, oh, this is something special. And onto what your point was, yeah, I definitely agree that the director needs to get a lot more credit for pulling that off.
Yep. Definitely. All right. Screenplay original. So the front runner. What do you guys think? Who's it looking like for that?
I really think at this point this is Spotlight's award to lose.
Mhm.
I think it's gained a lot of traction just based on its subject matter, and it's one of the more traditional Oscar movies we've seen this year.
Mhm.
It kind of hits those beats. It's dramatic. It kind of lets its actors act and tell the tale without relying on like grandiose set pieces or anything like the big productions. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I
And-
think. Oh, sorry.
Go
were you
ahead,
going
go
to
ahead.
say something? Okay. I think that although Spotlight was a well-written movie, I think that Ex Machina definitely needs to get more of a consideration here, especially when you consider what the setup of the movie was. Contained. It's a really contained story if you look at it. There's only 3 characters, really, and the whole story with its sci-fi aspect and talking about how people relate with robots had the potential to get extremely hackneyed really quickly if it wasn't done right. I mean, we've seen a lot of badly done sci-fi movies along the same lines before, and the fact that the movie was able to not only tell and invest a captivating story with a small amount of resources, but also build up the tension and keep it throughout the entire runtime. I think that's a really great accomplishment. So it definitely needs to get more of a consideration for screenplay.
But we can't leave out Inside Out. It could be a runner-up, and it could be a high possibility that it could become a snub. Don't underestimate what a Pixar studio can do either.
Too. And we can't leave out Straight Outta Compton either. I think it was like highly praised over the summer, and I that's the only film that I've seen from these original screenplay nominees, and I think it was a really well done movie, if you ask me. I think being able to incorporate all these characters, all these real people, and make it so real for the audience members that are watching it was just phenomenally done by the directors. And I think that there might be, up for the lead or up for the grabs for this actual nomination, but we'll just have to see. I think Straight Outta Compton was a good movie as well.
I loved Straight Outta Compton, actually. I thought it was one of this year's biggest snubs as far as most of the other categories. I believe that was its only nomination was for screenplay, which shocked me. I thought for sure it would grab, all the sound editing awards,
Yeah.
just kind of all of the way it opens, and there's the helicopters and the apocalypse now, like, coming over your head, and then just all the way the music and the concert scenes are edited and, like, sound mixed. It feels like you're there. And with everything that we've been talking about with the Oscars and Oscars So White, I really thought this was a movie that should have gotten more attention and really was neglected by the Oscars to their detriment, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it should have gotten a Best Picture nomination at least. Like I know that there could potentially be, because of the way the Academy rules work, there could potentially be 10 nominations, and this year there were only 8. So I could definitely see it as one of the nominations. But my main issue with it, as in regards to screenplay, is that as far as Straight Outta Compton goes, I think that the only place that I really liked the screenplay was in the first half of the movie, because that's where they manage a really well placed, tightly held together story about this group of people. But after that point in the second half, I felt that the story got a bit too disjointed and kind of lacked focus on what it really wanted to, as to what type of story it really wanted to tell, and where it was trying to go with some of its story and artistic directions.
I do kind of agree with that, but also at the same time, I think the story that actually happened, that it was kind of forced, it's based upon, definitely did. They broke up, they spread apart.
Yeah, that's true.
And I thought it did manage to keep at least somewhat of a focused storyline when I guess you could kind of be grasping at straws when you're trying to write that down as far as like three people that aren't even in the same room together for multiple years and trying to cover that gap of time. But yeah, no, it did peter out. I agree with you on that.
All right, moving on. Screenplay adapted. For me, I'm thinking The Big Short is probably going to win this one. At least, I mean, Brooklyn's also in this, and granted, Brooklyn was good and it was shot very well, but I think just with the backing of a lot of the supporters and all of that, I do think the Big Short will be taking this one home.
Yeah, I agree that The Big Short is probably the big favorite right now. Not to make a bad pun or anything, but yeah, it's the whole adapted screenplay category. It seems kind of weak this year. There's not a lot of other standouts besides The Big Short. I mean, The Martian, I guess you could hypothetically make a case for, but as far as just putting a well crafted story together, it's probably The Big Short in this category. But another thing I'd like to talk about is that as far as the screenplay nominations go, I was really disappointed that there wasn't a nomination for Steve Jobs, at least just as far as the screenplay goes, for Aaron Sorkin, because I because when I watched Steve Jobs, I came away with it thinking that, oh, this was like an action movie but with words instead of action. And that's just because of how well perfected Aaron Sorkin conveyed his style of rapid fire dialogue, and especially because, so I think that the main thing that made that movie was the screenplay. So for it not to be nominated was definitely a bit of a disappointment for me.
Yep.
What do you guys think of The Room being an adapted screenplay winner for this Oscars nomination?
Room could be an interesting choice. I think.
I think it's still going to be overshadowed by The Big Short in this case, even though Room was a great movie and a lot of people liked it. I don't think this category in particular is where it's probably going to be winning an Oscar. And lastly, Best Picture. I mean, we got some pretty good movies in this one this year, and I mean, a lot of people are pushing for quite a few different. I mean, the early front runner, of course, is Spotlight, but I mean, there could be some upsets going on here. Like Mad Max, for instance. There's good support, but it will be facing some difficulties with the other ones.
The odds when I checked them this morning were 5-4 for Spotlight and The Big Short, which I think are both well-deserved nominations. They're both really well-done movies about timely subject matters, so they're good choices. Personally, I'd like to see The Revenant bring the award home, because as I said earlier, from almost every single perspective, the cinematography, the acting, just the technical achievements alone of filming the entire movie in natural light, which the cinematographer, his name escapes me right now, deserves massive props for. So all of those combined should definitely make The Revenant the winner of this category. Any thoughts?
And it's also doing really well at the box office, and it did pick up quite a few Golden Globes a few weeks ago as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio needs an Oscar this year. He needs to be associated with winning one, so I'm definitely for it.
The Revenant would definitely be my personal choice to win as well. I think it's one of the most ambitious films I've seen come out. I mean, possibly even since like Apocalypse Now. This is a movie that, they shot it all in natural light, like you said, and they shot it in all these set locations, and they had to deal with not having snow. Like, they had to go back and reshoot in South America, and they bubbled over budget by like $50 million. And the fact that like everyone involved in this was committed enough to it and really put their heart and soul into this big production. I thought it was very impressive, very ambitious. It was one of the most ambitious films I've seen this year.
Yep.
All right, I think that concludes everything. My name is Amayo, and that is it for Everyone's a Critic. Thank you.